All right, I think we're probably going to get started. Thank you all for choosing to be with us today. If you are here to hear about Hummingbird Indigenous Family Services NEST GBI program, you're in the right spot. Oh, yay! Woo!
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I was like, okay. I have the clicker. We're going to try and do this as best as possible. All right. We're going to start with doing some quick introductions. I'm Petu Washte Mitakiapi, Camie Goldhammer Makiapi, Damakota Wiya, Sisituan Wapetuan Hamacha. Good day, relatives. My name is Camie Goldhammer. I'm a Dakota woman, so use she, her pronouns. My tribe is Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate, which is from South Dakota, but I grew up in Seattle's urban Native community. I am a licensed clinical social worker, lactation consultant, and full-spectrum Indigenous doula, and the founding executive director of Hummingbird Indigenous Family Services and co-developer of the NEST. So really happy to be here with you all.
Hafade Guahusi Sahi Velasco, Tau Tau Guahan, Chamordu, Mangofan Unkenko, Zan Velasco, or Mkadi Manabusan. Hello, my name is Sahi. I'm from the island of Guahan. I'm indigenous to the Marianas. I'm Chamorro, and I'm from the villages of Chalampagu and Hagutnya Heights. And my family clan names are Kadit and Can. Kadit means show off. So I'm going to show off a lot to you today.
I wish I had a clan name like that.
And Can is kind of one I don't really rep as much, but it's because my relatives drink a lot of beer cans. But anyway, I'm the storytelling program manager at Hummingbird. I'm going to tell a little bit about our storytelling program and how we think about narrative change. I'm a parent to a 15-year-old who thinks I tell corny dad jokes, and yeah, that's me. And I'm based in Seattle as well, in Duwamish, Coast Salish territory, and we're grateful to be here in Ohlone territory as well.
Yat she tia yazi yaneshia, Honogati Nashle, Torchini Bushes Chin, Ado Honogati Dashe, my Dishkishni Dashanella. So, hi everyone, my name is Tia Yazi. I am Diné or Navajo from the Navajo Reservation in Arizona, but currently reside in Duwamish lands in Seattle, Washington. I am the Nest Abundance Auntie, which we'll talk about a little during this presentation. So yes, I am Tia, which also stands for auntie, and I'm Abundance Auntie, and I'm also an auntie of a lot of nieces and nephews. But yeah, I'm really grateful to be here, and thank you for joining us today.
All right, so we have decided to kind of split this up into 3 parts. So I am going to start. We already did our introduction. Sorry, I forgot what we had. Also want to call in our other NEST key staff for the NEST, which is Lacey, who also served on the Planning Advisory Committee for the big conference this year. Lacey's at ceremony this week and last week, and so is unable to be here today, but she's the program manager of the NEST. And then Tess Abramson, who is our director of data sovereignty, so doing our, what I'm calling little T evaluation, and you'll hear more about our big T traditional evaluation later on. And then Tia did bring up, we should have had Arlo on here, and Arlo is Lacey's son, who we call the assistant program manager of the NEST, because he is at every meeting, everything we do. They are 2 peas in a pod at all time, but really just all the work that they do really makes the NEST what it is. So so we're breaking this up into 3 parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about the NEST, a little bit of a lay of the land of Washington State, a little bit about our community in the Seattle area, urban Native community in the Seattle area, a little bit around our other programming at Hummingbird, which is really a key component to the nest, and a brief overview of the development of the nest and what is required for eligibility and things like that. And then we're going to move it over to Sahi, who's going to talk more about our storytelling program and how we are telling the stories of our nest recipients and the families that we're so honored to work with. And then Tia is going to talk more around the maintenance of the nest now that we are at full enrollment, and kind of what she's been hearing from our 6-month check-ins and some of the things that we've heard from as Tess has gotten into evaluation as well. Hopefully we'll have time at the end for Q&A. I fully intend on going into the travel period between, so like you guys are gonna have to give us the hook to tell us to leave, so yeah. Okay, so a little bit about Washington State. One of the things that we find in general is that there's a lot of unknown about Native people in this country for obvious reasons, right? Oftentimes the way we're talked about is as, kind of like ancient beings that are no longer here. We're not really known, like our existence is pretty unknown. Most people have never met someone who's Native. And that invisibility piece is really, really real. And then we're also often invisible in the data because our populations are so small, yet no one wants to discuss why our population is so small to begin with, right? And so not only were we erased from the country in large parts via genocide and colonialism, but then we've also now been systemically erased from most data in the way that we're talked about. So I want to just bring a little bit of attention to understand what things are like in Washington State. I wish we had a ton of time to share more about Native people across the country, but this is just some really brief overviews of kind of the need for Hummingbird and the need for programs like the Nest. So in Washington State, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to kind of like orient myself. I pretty much know all this data by heart, but just want to remind myself what I put on here. But one of the most important things that we're really trying to combat at Hummingbird Indigenous Family Services is maternal mortality. In Washington State, it is Native women that have the highest maternal mortality rate in the country, in Washington State. Urban Native women actually have the highest maternal mortality rate in the United States. But in Washington State, we have, our maternal mortality rate is about 8 times higher that of white women. And then unfortunately, as with a lot of data, our Kanaka Maoli, or Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander relatives are grouped with Asian, which completely skews the data. And so what we know is that it is like Pacific Islander relatives and Native Hawaiian relatives have pretty much the same maternal mortality rate in Washington State when we pull the Asian population out of that data. And in some states, it's higher, even higher. We also have really high rates of child welfare involvement, so massive disproportionality in here, which you can see in this bottom picture here. And then our preterm birth weight is also pretty high in Washington State. It's about 13% of Native babies are born premature, and our prematurity rate is about 53% higher than that of white babies and moms. So that's kind of just a really brief overview. About 25% of Native people live in poverty in Washington State as well. And as we get into the urban areas, that number is increased significantly too. So Hummingbird Indigenous Family Services is just about 3 years old. There's a really interesting story into our origin story, which if you ever want to hear like the telenovela version of a nonprofit forming, it's very fascinating. But But I started Hummingbird officially in August of 2021, so we're 3 years old. At our core, we are a doula org. It was me and 3 doulas, and today we're at about 24 employees, 6 programs. I mean, it's just really, really grown significantly over the last few years, which really is a testament to the work of the amazing staff that we have at Hummingbird, and the immense amount of trust that our community has in us that we're so incredibly grateful to. 100% of us who work at Hummingbird would qualify for service at Hummingbird, so we are quite literally from the community that we serve. We have 2 primary programs that I'm going to talk about that play an important role or intersect heavily with the nest. Because one of the things, and these 2 will talk more about storytelling and kind of what we're hearing from families, but one of the really interesting things around what we're hoping to show at the nest is that when a family receives cash and culturally congruent supports, that's where the magic happens, right? So for us, our control group is not people who don't receive cash. Our control group is people who just get cash and nothing else, right? So what we're saying is when someone gets cash and they have a native doula and they have native home visiting supports, and it is no strings attached, so nobody has to participate in these things, but it's between 30 and 50% of families do participate in the additional supports that we have at Hummingbird. So when they get those things, that reduces their stress, increases their ability to freely love and attach to their child, which we believe and know heals historical trauma. So that's what we're hoping to show with our evaluation. So really briefly on our programs, we have Hummingbird Birth Keepers, which is our foundational program. We are a full spectrum Indigenous doula program. For us, what full spectrum means is that we serve families and pregnant people regardless of the outcome of their pregnancy. We are a pro-abortion organization. We support people who are terminating pregnancies, experiencing other types of pregnancy loss. We also support people who are trying to conceive babies, all the things. But a majority of our families are coming to us because they're pregnant and they're hoping to parent. Right? That's their goal. So we work with families pretty much as soon as they call us, and we serve them for at least 3 months postpartum in the doula program. Culture is a really important part of that, so we're incorporating our culture and language and all those things within the doula supports. Generally speaking, and everything is relative centered, and again, relatives is what we call our clients. But generally speaking, for our doula relatives, they're going to be getting at least weekly to bi-weekly visits from their doula. And then postpartum, which is a really important part of a really important piece of this, because in Washington State, about 30% of moms die within 42 days after having their baby, right? And 80% of maternal deaths in Washington State are considered preventable. And so those first 6 weeks are really, really important for us to be with moms in their homes, caring for them. And so postpartum, most of our doula relatives are getting between 4 and 12 hours of postpartum support in their home as well, okay? And then we have home visiting, Pila Makua Family Connections. Pila Makua is the Olelo word, the Native Hawaiian word for the parenting generation. So we serve people who are Native parents who are caring for a Native child or an Indigenous child. Within that, we have our home visitors and our emotional peer support bestie, who is essentially a peer counselor, someone who, Lashante, she's amazing, who's Fijian, and she herself has experienced perinatal mood disorders, and so she provides in-home peer support with parents who are struggling with a perinatal mood disorder. They work with families 27 weeks until 3 years postpartum, although an overwhelming majority of the Pila Makua relatives come from the doula program. So they're usually with their doula for 3 months and then transition to Pila Makua if they're at higher risk for maternal mortality. And so for us, that would be maternal mood disorder, so high risk maternal mood disorder, high risk of relapse or substance misuse and dependence, or child welfare involvement. So those are kind of our 3 high risk categories that we would move them or encourage them or open it up to them to join and be a part of Pila Makua. So that's kind of how that works. The key components of our home visits are infant and child development, because we know that when parents understand why their kids do the things they do, that helps a lot, right? Like, why does your 2-year-old not sit and eat a 2-hour meal with you? Because that's developmentally not possible for them to do, right? And so that helps a lot of relieve a lot of stress for parents. Caregiver mindfulness, self-compassion, and for us, the definition we use for that is working with parents to understand why they're feeling the way they feel and how to care for that part of them, right, inside. And then, of course, culture and language reclamation, which is incorporated in everything, because when we talk about the damage that colonialism did to us, it was our culture and our parents, so mothering, that was targeted through colonialism after genocide was no longer the primary method of the U.S. government to deal with their Indian problem, right? Kind of like after they decided to give up what we know of as genocide, then it was like, let's get at the culture, right? And you do that by separating mothers from their children. Okay? And so we have lots of years and years of government policy, and so that reclaiming of our culture and our language is a big part of repairing us as Native people, and that's why it's so important for us to do our introductions in our Native languages and reclaiming all of that. So a little bit, where am I at? Okay, well, I'm just worried about time. Okay, so the Nest. The Nest is our guaranteed income program. We are about 1 year into it. We launched it in August of last year. And to be eligible for the Nest, you have to be, had to have been, because we're full now, so it's closed. You had to have been at least 12 weeks pregnant and up to 6 weeks postpartum, although you had to enroll in the Nest or kind of join the quote lotto in pregnancy. Right? But because Native people are we have kind of 2 factors why we decided to do up to 6 weeks postpartum. One is we have higher rates of prematurity, right? So there's that piece. And then the other one is about 25% of Native women are not engaging in prenatal care until the 3rd trimester. So that kind of like late to engage in care prevents them from hearing about programs like this. And so that was kind of our reasoning for it. Of course, planning to parent. The other piece is that the parent themselves, the pregnant person, needed to identify as Native American, Alaska Native, Pacific Islander, or Kanaka Maoli, Native Hawaiian. Okay? They had to live in King County, which is Seattle's county and the surrounding suburbs, Pierce County, which is just south of Seattle, or south of King County, and then the Tulalip Indian Reservation, which is just north of King County, but we consider it an urban reservation. So they're kind of, they're not a rural reservation. They're like 45 minutes up by 5 type thing, so it's really close. So that's our area, and then we use the self-sufficiency standard for enrollment. So for a family of 4 living in King County, they needed to make no more than $100,000, and then it kind of breaks down for smaller families. So what families receive, again, are the Nest is no strings attached funding, and the parents receive $1,250 cash a month through their child's 3rd birthday. So it is about $45,000 plus a couple thousand more, depending on what time, at what point in their pregnancy they join the Nest, right? That's really going to vary. Again, it goes until the 3rd birthday because we know that birth to 3 time period is so important. Children develop about 80% of their brains by the time they're 3 years old. And the things that develop a brain are fat, sleep, love, and affection. And so a big part of the nest is keeping parents home, focusing on breastfeeding, attaching and bonding with their child, and really loving that child to give them the best start to life. On the child's 3rd birthday, they'll discharge from the nest, which we haven't gotten to yet, but they'll discharge from the nest, and we'll give the child a $5,000 529 as an investment into their future in that 2nd generation. So that is it. Yeah.
And now it's my turn. So I'm going to talk a little bit about truth-telling, our truth-telling era, but I wanted to start with a little chant, so if you want to get comfortable. When I say humming, you say bird. Humming, hummingbird. I just want to wake people up a little. I know we're like all kind of sleepy after lunch. And this is a fun part. Like the way that we're able to tell our stories is inherently indigenous to us. And if you want to go to the next, oh, you're already there. When Camie was talking about like the big T for traditional ways that we gather information, inherently that's indigenous wisdom, that's indigenous knowledge. And the ways that we do that is we're like, oh, we're not just going to gather qualitative and quantitative data. We're going to actually use art. We're going to use storytelling. We're going to go back, to the roots of like cultural practices for us to be able to document what the NEST program has done. And so I'm going to talk to you about 2 programs that exist under the program that I help support. And it's our Indigenous Storytelling Artist Residency. That's one way we're doing our storytelling and changing narratives, and also the NEST documentary. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about some bus ads that we did, which is really sweet. I got to do this with Patanjali, who no longer works with us, but was played a big role and also was a part.
Sorry, I meant to say that. Yeah, Patanjali De La Rocha and I co-developed the nest. They were the program manager from the get-go, like or program director. So huge, just played a huge role in this, and wouldn't have been able to do it without Patanjali. And they're now at the Department of Health doing amazing things there. But thank you I meant to bring it up when I was saying here in spirit, but.
Yeah, and they were like a big reason why the storytelling program also exists. It's funded by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and they said yes to us in this dream of being able to utilize art and documenting through film to tell our stories, especially around narrative change. And one of the projects that we did was through our bus campaign ads. And specifically, we ran different ads on our buses that talked about guaranteed income and what that meant for Indigenous peoples. We also gathered surveys. So you see in this, if you could go back up one. Oh, that's fine. Like there's folks here, we had different ads running in our sound transit, different trains, specifically buses that were present where all of our relatives could also see them, like the neighborhoods that they lived. And we were just hoping to be able to change our narratives and be like, actually, this work is for and by us. And like Camie was saying earlier, the narratives that we're often told about Native and Indigenous people really invisibilizes us and antiquates us, but we're here and we're existing and we are doing this work. And yeah, some of these messages are really powerful, and they were on buses, and sometimes actually still. I think they're still on some buses right now.
Turns out, unless they refill the advertising, they sell it, you get to stay on, and so it's still...
Yeah. Initially, they said 2 weeks, and it's been...
I never knew being on a bus was going to be on my bucket list, but I was like... I said it to my dad. I was like, I'm on a bus, Dad. So cool.
It was a big deal, yeah. I was in a Taco Time drive-thru, and I saw one of the bus ads. I was like, oh my God. And I almost drove through the drive-thru. I was like, forget the food. Yeah, we could go next. And yeah, so the bus sounds were really rad, and I was getting to this point, but I was jumping around. We had surveys, a QR code that people could actually contribute and take a picture of and respond to our surveys, and we were just asking community, like, what does guaranteed income mean to you? And there was a lot of really powerful responses, and I feel like, Tia, you'll be able to talk more about that specifically with our nest relatives and how they've been experiencing our program, but yeah, that's one way that we used art to get our messages out. And then the artist residency is like a big part of my heart. I'm an artist as well, and I've been a part of residency, so it was a big privilege to be trusted by Hummingbird to help run one. And the whole objective with our residencies in partnership with the Nest is to be able to select an Indigenous artist each year. They get paid up to 30 grand over a course of 3 months to be able to put on 3 workshops that are really specific to allowing our nest families in our guaranteed income program to be able to explore what does it mean to practice traditional parenting and cultural traditions and being an Indigenous parent. And we were able to have our first artist in residence named Sandra Segundo, who is Haida and Filipina, and also a grandmother and a mother. So it was really beautiful to see the intersections of that and also see the impact that this specific artist residency had on her life, but also the lives of all our families. So Sandra's medium and the artwork and practice that she does is really rooted in a lot of Haida language revitalization. She's a musician. She also does illustrations for children's books. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a few of the workshops that we were able to do with her, which was really beautiful. In this particular one, we did a button sewing and bookmaking workshop. And to the right is Sandra on the bottom corner with her mother, who helped create a button blanket for us. And that's a hummingbird, and it's 2 hummingbirds on their bellies, belly to belly with babies inside of them. And Sandra designed that, and her mom helped sew the button blanket. And the whole objective of this workshop was to have families from the Nest program and within the Hummingbird community sew abalone buttons onto this blanket and then tell stories and influence the way that she was going to write her Indigenous children's book for the end of the residency. So it was a beautiful way for us to, I don't know, put spirit into the button blanket, but also get feedback from our communities of how they would like their stories to be told in this children's book across multiple languages. And we'll be able to show you a little bit about that book, the next slides. And then this one is the Baby Hummingbird song. So one of our hopes, because Sandra's such a beautiful musician, was to be able to record a birth song that our families can have when they welcome the baby aside. And Sandra loved this idea. She also brought her grandchild who wrote a song about her grandmother and got to sing it. And they played their drum and sang it to our community. We also had a place where people could write the translation of Hummingbird in all their different languages, so she could include it in her illustrated children's book. And it was a beautiful time for like our kiddos and our families to come together and share language and different traditions in which we tell our stories. And then finally, we had a closing celebration this past in June. And you see here, Camie actually has the button blanket on. It's really sweet. So the whole idea was Sandra wanted to bring her family to sing song, and Camie was invited to dance the spirit into the blanket. And it's beautiful because all the buttons are symbolism for all the families that help create the nest and tell their stories. And then Sandra was able to read the children's book, and we're hoping to make this digital. It's not quite digital yet, and we're making hard copies for our families right now. But she was able to actually illustrate a lot of the children in our programs. So that was also really beautiful. And there's, how many languages would you say? Like 6 different languages in the book, and it's called Baby Hummingbird and Children of the Canoe. And so the whole objective of the story was that the families helped create was that all these different families from different tribes and nations come together on a canoe journey, and all the children get to be with this baby hummingbird, and they start sharing like their indigenous languages of things that they see in canoe journey. And it's really beautiful. And that's the cover of it specifically. Yeah, and there's actually the song. We're going to play that at the end, but I'm going to close with talking about our documentary. So that's the artist residency. We'll be having another one coming up with a new artist every year for up to 4 to 5 years, and they'll be following our nest families as well. And then finally, our documentary is really exciting. I got to meet other folks here too that have been doing documentary series to talk about narrative change, which was really inspiring for me because this is the first time I'm helping produce something like this. And we're working specifically with Terrence Jeffrey Santos, who is a Filipino filmmaker based in Seattle. And he actually created a short documentary for Hummingbird in the past. So our whole hope right now is to share the creation of the nest, to be able to interview and follow families, up to 3 families, over the course of their time in the program, to really document the impact and the effects of how the Guaranteed Income Program supports their families. And we're also hoping to share more about Hummingbird's story as well. So these are some still shots of staff. You might see someone special up here on there. And it's been such a beautiful way to start this project. And later this fall and coming into the new year, we're going to be working directly with families. And they are open to inviting us into their homes, going on clinic, trips, whatever the families want. We want to make it as accessible as possible and go to them or host spaces for them as well. Yeah, that's our storytelling program.
Cool. So I'll be talking about our abundance era since I'm the abundance auntie. But yeah, so I think just to explain a little bit about what exactly an abundance auntie is, especially for me. So I think of it as a really cool title, and that kind of translates to case manager or social worker, but reclaiming that for myself and for our communities, just because I know the harmful impact that social work has in our Indigenous communities. So I really like the term and title of abundance auntie, and I think also too that I've been an auntie myself for many years since I was small, and so I've been doing this work since I was little, but didn't have necessarily the licenses or degrees that followed me in those years. And so now that I'm here, I'm able to just call myself an abundance auntie, which confuses my family because they're like, can't you just do this at home? Yeah, why do you have to be in Seattle to do that? But yeah, that's a whole different story. But yeah, so as an abundance auntie, one of the main things that I do are 6-month check-ins. And so 6-month check-ins can look however the family wants them to look. So it can be very high touch. For example, we can go take a walk together or go get ice cream or go to the museum. It can be very low touch where they just want me to simply call them and me check in for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Or it can just be a simple text message that, hey, I'm good, and I don't need any other resources at this time. So I think we're really emphasizing that no strings attached part of our program. And I think also families are rebuilding that trust with the systems and really testing the waters of what does no strings attached looks like. So are you being serious? We don't have to do anything. We don't have to opt in for a survey. We don't have to go attend this thing. I can just simply text you and I'll still get my cash this month. So I think right now what I'm seeing is a lot of folks are still testing the waters, but building that trust with me in our program through our doulas and through our home visitors, where they're like, hey, these guys are actually really cool. So yeah, I want to go get ice cream with you, and I want you to meet my baby in real life, and I want you to come to our homes. So that's been really awesome to see that, transition of that trust or that rebuilding of trust in our community. But yeah, 6-month check-ins, we're almost on cohort 7. So I'm through 1 through 7, and now we're going to start over with cohort 1 starting next month. So technically it'll be their year 1 check-in. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that. But I found some themes throughout the first year. So the first one being security and confidence. And I think what I mean by this is that they're feeling secure and confident in their relationships. And not only with their baby, but with their family members, and with the people that are providing them the care in their homes, like our doulas, our home visitors, and everybody in the community too. So what I'm hearing a lot from our families is that they're able to stay home with their babies and bond for the first time because they didn't have that opportunity with their other children, because they had to go back to work immediately. Or they're just taking time to breastfeed for the first time. So a lot of folks said that they didn't have the opportunity to breastfeed with their other children, but now they can take that time off of work and from the real world to actually bond with their children and to breastfeed them and give them that love and nurturing that they can. And the other theme that I'm seeing too is financial flexibility, and this comes with the no strings attached part. So a lot of folks, like, I think commonly we hear like they are spending money on like food and the things that they need, like diapers or formula, but also they're able to provide other things like buying bed frames for their children. Or another really cool story that I heard was that one family was able to bring their mom from the Marshall Islands and buy their plane ticket over to help care for their children and help them support them through that postpartum period. So that having that flexibility in their lives tremendously reduces their stress, and they are also able to just be with their children and take them to go to the zoo or to the aquarium and really just spend that time with their children in ways that they couldn't with other public programs or other public benefits programs. And the last theme that I put on here is seen and supported, but I also wanted to add they're also heard and loved. And I think we see this through our special circumstances at the NEST program. So we did have a few families who have either had stillborn children or had their babies pass away. And what we were able to do is not terminate their cash. So we're able to provide them with the guaranteed income for a year or more, depending on their circumstance. And so I think during those pivotal and very sacred times and through those grieving times, we were able to support them as an organization and surround them with that love and the abundance that they need in their lives, and really be there for them and make them feel heard and seen and supported. And I think that comes with the role as an abundance auntie too, or just an auntie in real life, is just to make sure that your relative is doing okay during that time, and to make sure that they're being fed, or to make sure that they're drinking water. Just those little things, and I think that's where a lot of the things come up, such as seen and supported, that they feel heard and loved, and they're rebuilding trust with all of us in those situations. And then this right here is from our evaluation program, so the little t evaluation from Tess. So what she does is she reaches out to our families and parents, and this is all optional again. But all of these quotes were given by our families just because they want to show their support and share their story with us, either through Sahi or Tess. So one of the questions that she asked was, what difference is a nest making for your family? And so this family said, it's been really amazing. It has helped me and my family mentally. I will say that's a very big part too for us, because we have the financial stress, the burden, and all of that. And even if it's just however much we receive a month, it really does help, because then I don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, how would I come up with half the rent? I know for a fact that I'm receiving my gift from the nest. Then I can just be like, okay, I can put my gift and set it for rent, and then we can cover the rent. It's just very helpful. And I'm so glad I took my midwife up on referring me to my doula, because then it just started this whole process. And I'm like, can you imagine if I said no? And then the next one is answering the same question as well. And they say, yeah, it's a big difference. I was planning on going to work, which was going to be very difficult with breastfeeding and everything. I wanted to breastfeed. I breastfed my son for a whole year, and it's a big accomplishment. And then with my daughter, I really wanted to breastfeed this time. We're just getting by with that money. It's helping us a lot with different things that we need. We just got a Zoom membership, just doing fun activities with the kids and being able to support us and have some extra money to do some fun things as well. It helps my husband with his stress as well because he's in school. And then this next question is, how was the nest experience been different from any other assistant programs you have participated in? And this family said, everyone's always been super kind and nice. I have tried to apply for other things and people wouldn't get back to me, or they would just kind of be like they had other things to do. But Hummingbird is always going above and beyond to get me and fulfill my needs, so I really appreciate that a lot. And so I think just all of that to say is that going back to the themes, especially being seen and heard, is that here at Hummingbird and through the NEST program, we're able to wrap all of these families in the care and abundance that they deserve. And I really try to emphasize that with our families, that you deserve to be in this program. Because they do tend to kind of have that either residual trauma or historical trauma or anything from their families, and those things do come up naturally. But just re-emphasizing with them that you do deserve to be seen, you do deserve to be heard, and you do deserve to be loved, and that's why we're here, and that's why I'm here as their abundance auntie. But yeah.
Awesome. So we're gonna close. We want to play the our birth song, our baby hummingbird song for you all, so you can hear it. And then if we have, we'll hopefully do some Q&A if you have any questions for us. So we can go ahead and do that.
Baby hummingbird, da da dee haju, and children of canoe, paddles pull together. We are friends forever. The children of canoe, baby hummingbird, cakey manu, and children of canoe.
All right, that's our song. I love this song so much for so many reasons, but one of the things about the canoe that's really special is that the canoe is really what ties us and our Pacific, like Native American and the Pacific Islands and Native Hawaiians together. Like that is what allowed us to trade, to be in community with each other hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and so that song, like really pulling that together, bringing out that we're all in this canoe together, and that solidarity as Indigenous people is so important. So anyway, cool. Any questions? Anything? Yeah. Either, yeah, do you want to run? Yeah.
Thank you, this is amazing. I have a question about the evaluation and sort of like this decolonized evaluation methodology, the little t, I guess. So I have two questions. One is the big T similarly like unique and different in a way that you want to talk about? And also in either category, like what's something you learned that made you sort of change the way you did things to make it more aligned with what you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah. So I want to make sure I'm hearing it right. So are you wanting to know is how is our kind of like little t evaluation, like what most people would consider evaluation, different and unique in itself, or is it more around like the traditional storytelling?
So I get how the little t is different.
Yeah.
But it sounded like you had
So, yeah, so no, so we consider the big T what Sahi does. So when we say traditional, we mean like tradish, like we're traditional, you know, our traditional cultural teachings is our big T. The little t is what most everyone else would call traditional evaluation, which is what TESS does. So yeah, thank you for that, because I'm sure others were maybe unsure on that too. So yeah, and like Sahi said, the evaluation that TESS is doing is definitely unique in itself and uses a lot of qualitative data, but then we'll also be pulling out data from our chart, from our family, because the doulas chart, the home visitors chart, so we'll be pulling out information there as well. So, we're hoping to see things like when people get GBI and a doula, that breastfeeding rates increase, prematurity rates decrease, things like that. They already decrease significantly with the doula, so we're hoping to see like an added jump with when they get cash too. Yeah.
And to add on to that, I think that the storytelling program that I run, the NEST Guaranteed Income Program, and our Data and Sovereignty all intersect. So I've noticed, like, even in the process of us planning our documentary, talking to our data sovereignty person, they're like, oh, these are the themes we found. I'm like, actually, those are the things we're gonna talk about. I feel like it really informs a lot of the thematic things we're looking at when we want to tell these stories, and they often do come from the feedback from our relatives. So it's our community informing the ways that we're going to produce and create these stories as well.
Dr. Zaya?
Thank you. Hi. Oh, sorry. Okay, well, one of the things that I've always admired about y'all is the solidarity work that you all do. I think that in this country, we often think of Native folks as like a monolith or Indigenous folks as a monolith, but what I know is that there are many distinct tribal folks that are coming to the table for this program, and what I know from my experience is that solidarity work is hella hard. So I just was wondering if you have any lessons you can share about what your solidarity work has looked like, lessons you've learned that might be useful for the rest of us.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think and big shout out to Abundant Birth, Dr. Zaya. Abundant Birth was our primary consultant, in developing the nest. We did a lot of phone calls for like a year and a half as we were developing out our program. But yeah, the solidarity piece is really important. And also there's lots of areas where we have, we don't serve all Indigenous people, right? Like there's some areas that there are some shortcomings. Well, I don't want to say shortcomings. We have a specific group we serve, and that's who we serve, right? And that there's lots of Indigenous people around the world who don't fall under our purview. But our, kind of where I see it is we have like these similarities that are really important, right? Like the canoe, like the Pacific, that kind of stuff, and also a shared oppressor, right? And that's something specifically the United States government and the Canadian government. And so thinking about that, and this is something that I think as Native people goes back to kind of early Indian policy, which was a policy of urban relocation. Well, and even started before that, being moved to reservations. Like we had distinct tribes, we had distinct communities, that kind of stuff. There was war, there was, things that we didn't get along. And then you're put on a reservation with 11 other tribes, and you all speak different languages, and you all have to kind of come together and figure it out to survive, right? And we had the same thing happen in boarding schools, and we had the same thing happen in urban areas where there was an urban relocation program of the U.S. government to move Native people to urban areas, which is why 75% of us live in urban areas, and why you have a Dakota person living in Seattle, right, who grew up in Seattle. And so, that really forces, just like we see in immigrant communities and refugee communities and, our other BIPOC communities around the United States, where we come together and we have to connect, right? And because that's one of the goals of colonialism is to divide and conquer. And so I think like our ancestors really recognized early on that as Indigenous people, we have to connect, we have to, that solidarity piece is so incredibly important. And like I said, there's still some areas that we would definitely be, and I personally have been challenged on of like, well, what about your, Indigenous relatives to Mexico and South America? They just simply don't have the same outcomes that we have and are impacted differently in our state. It doesn't mean that that's not a very important population to target in other areas, but it's just not what our purpose is. And so it's been really tricky to kind of walk that line and be a good relative to all people, and also like be really focused and mission driven, because we're very, very mission driven, like that we have who we serve and that's how it is. So, I think that, I don't know what I necessarily have as advice, but I think that solidarity is so important, and especially if we like broaden it to outside of the Indigenous communities, specifically with like Black and Indigenous people, like we have to, right? We always say like there's no Indigenous sovereignty without Black liberation. They're again, shared oppressor, like we have to do everything together, and that's how it works. And until we do, then there's gonna be separation. But yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, just to build on that, we also have Black and Native relatives, right? And
so many mix.
And it's also important to name that Blackness is inherently Indigenous, and like connecting those things. We also have Two-Spirit relatives and queer and trans relatives that we also serve. And so there's a big network of support, and we also recognize like the ways in which we can grow in community and in solidarity in our work. But I just wanted to name that.
Love it. Yeah, so important. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you. He's like, I'm going to post up in the back of the room and be good.
He's a track star. Hi, this question is kind of in first draft, so if you need me to just repeat it or explain better, I will. But I really love the $5,000 529 plan that you guys put up for, when the kid turns 3. I would love to just hear more about just that plan and how that $5,000, I'm assuming, grows with the kid as they get older, as well as to any initiatives that you guys do to, support the children, because in your first cohort, I'm guessing they are above the age of 4 or 5 maybe. And I would just love to hear more about how you invite, the kids to be a part of everything that you guys do and how you support them as well.
Totally, yeah. So for the 529, that's going to be one of those things we figure out over the next 2 years, because we're not like our first cohort is in year 1, right? Like, or kind of, like the August of last, year 1 is about to end for cohort 1, and each cohort is 15 people, and we had 10 cohorts, right? And so we're still about 2 years out from needing to buy the 529. So we have a lot of things to plan. It was, Magnolia Mothers Trust is a 529, and that's when I heard them talk about that, I was like, yes, like that is so smart. Our funder was very much like, when I had asked kind of early on, like, what, can I have a number to work within, or how many people do you want to serve? And their response was just like, dream big, figure it out. Like, you tell us, you're the community, you tell us what you want, right? And so that's kind of where we were at when I heard about the $1,000 529 Magnolia Mothers Trust does. I was like, I want to do that too. Like, that sounds amazing. We were just talking about, because I've been having some conversations about baby bonds, and I was like, oh man, I maybe should have thought this through, because maybe we should have done baby bonds instead, so there's more freedom for the child to spend it spend that money how they want, but I don't know. I don't know if there's any flexibility in those kinds of things yet, but it'll be really interesting, and hopefully we can present later on of what that really looks like, you know, once we're actually purchasing the 529s. But, you know, kind of where that really comes from, I mean, generally speaking, and I don't know if I actually already said this, but generally speaking at Hummingbird, we serve the parent. We serve the pregnant person. We believe that the best thing for Native children is to love their mother and care for their mom, right? And the one who gave birth to them. And that's kind of, you know, what we focus on. And so the kids are such a huge part of the work we do, but they're not our focus. So like even, you know, the GBI, like if mom gets arrested and the kiddo goes into care with someone else, the GBI stays with her, right? Like it doesn't go with the kid because it's for her or them. So it's yeah. But that being said, like the kids are such a huge part of everything we do. All of our programming is really geared toward kids. Almost everything is developmentally appropriate. I mean, like they're incorporated in our home visiting and our doula program. Attachment bonding is such a huge part of it. And so we're constantly kind of working on developing programs and community gatherings and outings and things like that that really center the kids and where they're at developmentally and culturally and all of that kind of stuff. So there's, yeah, I don't know. So there's still to be continued, I guess, with like the 529, but I think it'll be interesting. We'll definitely be calling on Magnolia Mothers Trust to figure out, how did you do this? You know, type thing, but we're really excited about it. And I think, you know, some of the things like I was saying, is I was like, once I heard about baby bonds recently, I was like, oh, did I make a big mistake by not putting that in there? Because we have, you know, college isn't for everyone, right? There's like, college isn't for everybody. We want, you know, what we're really wanting for, or our intention behind doing the 529 when we first wrote it in, when I wrote it into the original grant, was to increase the child's capacity to exercise their own sovereignty and self-determination, what's best for themselves, right? And, you know, and that's where it was my own blind spot, my own bias as an you know, a kind of lowercase t, traditionally educated person, of that's the way to do it, right? And so I've been thinking about like, man, what are some ways that we can increase, you know, for our family or for those kiddos that don't, college maybe isn't their path, or maybe they're part of a tribe that pays for college and so they don't need a college fund, right? I mean, there's just so many different things. So those are some of those like, little challenges that have been popping up that we'll kind of see what kind of flexibility we have. Because we do, our grant that we have is 5 years. The pilot is 5 years long, but each year we kind of like reapply for it essentially. So I think there is some flexibility. So those are some things that Tia and Lacey and I will be discussing with the funder in the future. But yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Comments? Cool. All right. Looks like we're done anyway. Cool. All right.